What we just heard is the final movement from a cycle of 23 short piano pieces titled Impressions by German-American composer Julius Schloss. Using the 12-tone technique, Schloss wrote the first 5 movements of this cycle, titled 5 Little Piano Pieces, in 1926-27, when he was a student and assistant of Alban Berg in Vienna. Schloss wrote the remaining movements much later, between 1964 and 1967, at the invitation of pianist Carl Steiner, and renamed the cycle Impressions. This was long after Schloss had twice been forced to emigrate. In 1939, he fled from Germany to Shanghai, and in 1948, he emigrated to the United States. When Schloss composed the later movements for Impressions in the 1960s, including the piece to be discussed here, he used the same 12-tone row as in the 5 earlier pieces from the 1920s. As Hartmut Krones and Don McLean have noted, in the final movement of Impressions, Schloss quotes the tune from the Bach chorale Es ist genug, which Alban Berg cites in his Violin Concerto. Schloss sounds the chorale melody in the right hand and imitates the tune one measure later at the 12th below in the left hand. A further reference to Berg is the numbering of this movement. 23 was Berg's fateful number, which Schloss knew from his time as Berg's assistant, acquainted with the secret program of Berg's lyric suite, in which this number plays a significant structural role. That Schloss's movement, which is reproduced here from his unpublished manuscript, is an homage to Berg, is further confirmed elsewhere in the manuscript sources, where Schloss titles the piece I Remember B. De Profundis, sad enough. B refers to Berg, De Profundis to the title of the poem by Baudelaire that Berg secretly set in the lyric suite, and sad enough to the Bach chorale Es ist genug, it is enough, associated with the topic of death. The chorale melody, which is by Johann Rudolf Ahle, is striking for its opening motive, which rises from the tonic note through a whole tone tetrachord. By imitating this melody in the left hand one measure later, Schloss creates an elegant rhythmic complementarity between the two lines, in that longer note values in one canonic voice coincide with shorter note values in the other. Schloss embeds this canon, which would only partially work in tonal music, in a complex web of 12-tone rows. But how was he able to do this with a row that was not originally designed with this chorale tune in mind, since Schloss had settled on his row already in 1926, almost a decade before Berg quoted the Bach chorale in his Violin Concerto in 1935, using a completely different row? The ascending whole tone tetrachord of the melody cannot be found in any continuous segment of Schloss's row, shown here at the top. But the tetrachord does appear towards the end of the row if we skip over the penultimate note. Schloss needs this motive at the beginning of a row though. If we play the row backwards, we get the motive at the beginning, but now it is descending instead of ascending. To make it go up, we have to invert the retrograde. This gives us the retrograde inversion of the row, which, transposed to start on C natural, is the form Schloss uses at the beginning of his piece. Transposed down a fifth, the retrograde inversion starting on F then fits the canonic imitation at the lower 12th of the tune. Let's see now how Schloss weaves the 12th-tone counterpoint around the canon shown at A here. As illustrated at 1, he starts with Ri10. As shown at 2, the imitation entering in the second measure uses Ri3. So far, all pitches follow the exact order in the rows. But for the next two statements of the row at 3 and 4, which also use Ri10 and Ri3 respectively, Schloss has to bend the pitch order as illustrated to accommodate the chorale tune. The last two rows at 5 and 6, on the other hand, are again used mostly straightforwardly. It is striking that Schloss is able to accommodate the entire two-part canon shown at A with only two row forms, Ri10 and Ri3, albeit with one exception. There's one note in the lower voice of the canon that is not accounted for in the 12th-tone counterpoint, that is, the repeated low G in the fourth measure. The final row, which is the cycle's original prime form P3, follows after the canonic imitation has ended and hence has no contrapuntal obligation with respect to the canon. Let us now hear the movement again, while following the analytical diagram. Note how in Schloss's counterpoint, pitch class duplications marked in blue here always form unisons and never octaves, how the piece follows mostly the steady quarter rhythm of the chorale before dissolving into running eighth notes once the canon has come to a close, and how the movement departs from and returns to C.